Hello artists, thanks for joining us. My name's Tok and I am with Liverpool Independent Art School. Today I'm just going to talk a little bit about perspective. So as artists we tend to think perspective is one thing, which is a difficult theory about vanishing points and multiple vanishing points and 3-point perspective and those types of things. Perspective really just means your viewpoint, so where you see something from, and we use this in terms like a political perspective or a visual perspective. Yeah. So for us, we understand that things which are nearer appear bigger, things which are further away appear smaller. And that taken, what we can also say is that our viewpoint changes what we're looking at. So if we were to wander around our city, which I'm sure most of us are really missing doing at the moment, we'd see that our buildings are according to where we're standing. So we'd see certain things in front of other things. If we were to move to a different point in the city, we'd see the same landmarks but in different positions. So this would be also our perspective. So today I've got this kind of game to think about that. I've been cutting out these little semi-recognisable outlines of buildings, maybe cutting a little bit further into them with scalpels, and I've also been adding some tape to make slightly raised lines. And I've done this with kind of recognisable shapes from around Liverpool. And I've also done it with kind of generic shapes. So I wanted some shapes that we weren't quite sure what they were. So I'm thinking maybe rows of Georgian houses with chimneys on top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay them out and I'm going to make a rubbing of these and then move them around, make a different perspective of the same shape. Okay, so you can see this is laid out in just a generic skyline way, and in fact the individual pieces could be set out in any different way, but here we've got this kind of Anglican cathedral with a terrace in front of it, possibly kind of Gambia Terrace, Hope Street, that type of thing. And moving through we've got the Metropolitan Cathedral and then a generic terrace just to give some shape, then Lime Street Station and St John's Beacon and down to the Liver buildings, and maybe some of these kind of old warehouses down by Jamaica Street and Beetham Tower. So we've got this kind of set out, but as I say, it could be viewed from any particular position. So the next thing I'm going to do is make a drawing from this. Being a printmaker, I'm going to use a printmaking brayer and some Cranfield ink. Okay, so I'm just going to spread the ink out to a nice kind of velvety consistency. I'm using the Speedball brayer for this, and the brayer is a printmaking tool which essentially is a flat edge of a cylinder which can't go further down or further up, just stays on a straight line. And of course what we've done with the cutout parts is that we've made them slightly different heights. So adding tape in or cutting sections away or those types of things actually change the height of the thing that we're going to work from. So we would turn this into colograph, but today I'm just going to make essentially a rubbing. Okay, so we can see I've laid out our skyline a slightly higgledy-piggledy way. We'd be lucky to get this actual view from anywhere in Liverpool, but it gives an approximation of the kind of Hope Street end, the cathedrals, Lime Street, St John's Beacon, maybe the Jamaica Street warehouses, and further down to the dock. So I'm putting this very thin. This is newsprint, which you probably recognise from chip shops and things like that. And I'm just going to brayer over some of the ink onto the surface to see what we get. And we can actually see that the buildings appear through it. So it really is just a rubbing. Yeah. I'm going to come from a couple of different directions and maybe get a bit more of a shape. It gives this kind of nice feeling of a maybe moody, foggy day. Let's see if we can get the, there we go, there's the St John's Beacon arriving as well. And maybe just a little flourish for some sky across there. Okay, so we've got here this kind of industrial looking foggy skyline of our city. we can see the shapes of the buildings, the edges, and a little bit of the detail just picked up by the brayer. So it's kind of interesting, moody, not loads of detail to it, but that's not really what I was aiming for. So I quite like this. So if I was to wander to a different part of the city and change my perspective and stand in a different way, I might see the buildings in a different conjunction. So I've just moved the plates around slightly, not massively, just a little bit, to make a separate drawing. And again, we're getting this kind of slightly moody approach, which reminds me a little bit of cubism, to see lines kind of transverse and break up parts of the detail. So I quite like that. And all I've done is put the buildings now in a different position. So if you've enjoyed this content today, feel free to come and join us at Liverpool Independent Art School on Patreon, and look out for more of our stuff, and follow our Facebook page. Get in touch if you want to find out about classes when we return to ordinary studio practice after lockdown, and hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later. Okay, look after yourselves.